too, after a tranquil gardener's world makes a show of things.
Hello, welcome to Gardener's World and rather a wet Longmeadow. But we've still got lots of colour, despite the rain and the gloom, and it's warm at least. However, plants are going over, and what we're really going to be looking at today is keeping the show going, making sure that we get the maximum bang for our buck for as long as possible.
This week, Carol travels to the west coast of Scotland, where the Gulf Stream provides perfect conditions for a very special garden.
I'm on holiday. We are going to be looking at plant associations that give your garden that wonderful, exotic, tropical feel.
And Joe joins in the preparation of a riotously floriferous street in Bristol, where everyone is getting ready for the arrival of the judges of the RHS Britain in Bloom competition.
And as well as enjoying the colour of late-flowering clematis, I'll also be taking cuttings and showing that clematis are really not difficult to propagate. And I'll be celebrating the wonder of late summer flowers that will grow in shade. At the beginning of June, I planted up our summer display for these 4 big pots that we've had for years as a core part of the dual garden. But this year, for the first time, I used phormiums. This is Phormium Blackadder as the main central species. I wanted something that would just splay out like a firework. But what I particularly like has developed is not just the plum colours of the top of the leaf, but the lovely slaty, smoky grey of the underside, and that has slowly got better and better. Now, the chocolate cosmos, Cosmos atrosanguineus, added these in, and they've really worked well. If you smell it, it does have a fragrance, if you can call it that, quite distinctly, of chocolate. It's uncanny. But the thing to do to keep it going and keep the flowering is to deadhead. You can see here that you've got a spent flower, and if you're not sure whether that's about to flower or has finished, a bud that's not yet opened, it's a tight ball, almost like a berry there, whereas it's longer, more cylindrical when it's finished. But when you deadhead it, follow it back down, which can be actually quite a long way, until you get to a leaf or side shoot and cut. If you really want to get a flush of flowers, deadhead earlier than you might otherwise think. So, for example, with dahlias, this is Bishop of Llandaff, which when it comes out is a really intense red. But if I cut that, the 2 buds waiting to open will open faster. And I try and deadhead every day, and if you can't, certainly every 2 or 3 days, and that will just keep those flowers coming. The other thing, which is important, is to give the plants just a little bit of an extra feed. Not a massive boost, but just a little bit of a helping hand, because they are working very hard at this time of year, so they need a feed. Go nice. The comfrey leaves I soaked some weeks ago are now ready to turn into feed. It's important to sieve off as much of the remaining plant material as possible. What remains is a concentrate, and this must be diluted with water at a ratio of between 20 and 30 to 1. comfrey feed is superb as a general purpose feed, but liquid seaweed is also excellent, and if you can't get either of those, any general purpose tomato feed will do the job very well indeed for flowering plants. And remember, this is not all flowering plants in the border. This is specifically for plants in a container, because they can't reach any nutrients other than that which you've given them in the compost. And if you buy a general purpose compost, it will run out of nutrients after about 6 weeks. So you're going to have to feed from this stage of summer through into the beginning of autumn. But what you don't want is anything that's high with nitrogen. So if you look on the label, it'll have NPK and the percentage of each. And at this time of year, you want the N to be the lowest. You want a very low nitrogen content, because nitrogen stimulates green foliage, plenty of good, strong growth, which is great in the early part of the year, but actually will stop flowers growing and also encourage aphids and fungi and all kinds of problems. Water it in once a week. When you mix it up, resist the temptation to make it any stronger than the instructions. You'll do no good. If anything, do it a little bit weaker. I give just a gentle, weak feed. And the idea is not to force feed the plant. You just want to gently support it, like a hand in the small of the back, just pushing the plant in the direction that it's already going. Here in the summer rain, with quite a warm temperature and the garden growing lush with exotic plants like the phormiums, you can believe that you're in the jungle. But Carol has been to Logan Botanic Garden on the west coast of Scotland. Now that really is exotic.
Over the last few weeks, I've been looking at the exciting ways gardeners put plants together, from the naturalistic to the formal. But today, I'm on holiday. We are going to be looking at plant associations that give your garden that wonderful, exotic, tropical feel. This style of planting tends to include large, leafy plants that are tall and architectural. To see how best to combine them, I've come to the celebrated Logan Botanic Garden near Stranraer. How'd you like my friend? Look at this most tropical, exotic corner. Isn't it gorgeous? How about this for starters? This is a foxglove, believe it or not. It's from the Canary Isles, and it's called Isoplexis septrum. So called, I suppose, because each of these flowers is just like a sceptre on this strong stem. Well, however desirable it is, there aren't very many gardens in the UK where you get away growing this completely unscathed over winter. But there are alternatives. There's Digitalis ferruginea with tall spikes and that same kind of bronze and ochre colouring. What works beautifully with this Isoplexis is the fern, Woodwardia radicans. It's not reliably hardy in the UK and may need protection over winter, but it's a great match because it's got lime green fronds that are tinged with bronze as they unfurl. I think it's a delight, but it's sort of made all the more dramatic by these huge erupting stems of the Tetrapanax. Tetrapanax grows happily in mild, sheltered areas. But a more reliable alternative for the rest of us is Fatsia japonica. It's more likely to survive the winter outdoors and gives you a similar effect. And the Tetrapanax is thriving here. Just take a look at this. In these perfect conditions, it's tunnelled its way right across the path, under the grass, and it's coming up alongside these tree ferns. Not likely to happen in your garden, even if you can grow it. But isn't it just wonderful? The right plant in the right place. I caught up with Richard Baines, the curator here, to find out if we can bend the rules slightly to grow more tender and half-hardy exotics in gardens around the rest of the UK. Richard, Logan is such a wondrous place, but you've got very, very special conditions here, haven't you?
Yeah, we've got a real influence from the Gulf Stream. You know, it's almost like an island with sea on three sides. We get very, very little frost. Our usual winter minimums are about -3, -4. So as you can see today, what a wide variety of exotic plants we can grow. If you have a plant growing in wet conditions, it'll maybe stand about -5. But if you have a plant growing in very well-drained soil, it maybe stand -8. So the drainage is really, really important. For example, if you're growing South African bulbs, simple things such as putting a little bit of gravel beneath the bulbs, and that makes a real massive difference and makes your plants much hardier.
So suppose you've got an average British garden, it's pretty wet and pretty cold. Are there still plants that you can grow that are hardy but will give you this same kind of wonderful tropical effect?
Well, you have plants, for example, the castor oil plant, Fatsia, lots of cabbage palms, Cordyline australis, and the mountain cordyline, Cordyline indivisa, is really, really hardy. So these are great plants for adding, you know, a real tropical effect to the garden. It's all about creating garden theatre.
And the garden has theatre in spades. Astonishingly, these tree ferns are veterans from the Great Exhibition at Crystal Palace in 1851. And then there are tall architectural plants like Echium nervosum that add intense colour to the garden. It's also a magnet for bees and the beautiful hummingbird hawk moth. Well, I'm sure lots of you are thinking, it's all very well for those people at Logan creating all these marvellously exotic and tropical looking borders. But then just look at this. All these plants are hardy. They're plants that practically everybody could grow in their garden. There's this marvellous Rodgersia. This is Rodgersia esculifolia. As a family of plants, they're much underused. But look at it. Immediately it creates that same sort of tropic-y feel. And how about that for a flower head? Isn't that spectacular? How well it contrasts with this hosta. This is Seaboldiana, and here it's glaucus, and it's got these ribbed leaves with their fine points. You could hardly get your hand in between these leaves. It's so thick and gorgeous. In complete contrast, there's a peony, a tree peony here. This one's Delavei. Peonies are renowned not only for their gorgeous flowers, but also for their foliage. Very often in spring and in autumn again, they take on these lovely reddish tones. And so too do the Rodgersias. This is a different one. This is Podophylla, with those handsome leaves, already sort of tinged in red around the edge. And in the autumn, it's going to be spectacular. Well, to create that kind of tropical feel, really, any of us can do it. All we've got to do is choose the right plants.
"25 years ago, I made a road trip up the west coast of Scotland, visiting all the gardens I could. This was the end of April, and Logan was one that stuck in my mind, and I think it's about time I went and had another look. Now, what's really lighting up the jewel garden with the biggest and most intense colour at this time of year are the clematis. We've got lots of them in here. This one's Gypsy Queen, and it's just heavy with flower, almost toppling over, not just with the actual weight, but with the intensity of colour. This clematis is my favourite of them all. It's called, it's a bit of a mouthful, Clematis Viticella purpurea plana elegans. And I love the way that the flowers are bobbled like wonderful sort of raised embroidery on a dress. And this is one of the oldest clematis grown. It goes back to Elizabethan times. Absolute joy. This is a clematis called William Kennet that did most of its flowering at the end of May and beginning of June. So what it gives is an opportunity to take cutting material that doesn't at the moment have any flower buds on. So I'm going to cut that off back here, like that, and I'll probably take another one while I'm about it. That's no good because it's got flowers. Well, that might be good. Let's try that. Right. Clematis cuttings are internodal. You all right, Nigel? Poor old Nigel. It's wet and you're a bit miz, aren't you? Internodal cuttings. If you look here, you can see that the leaves come off from nodes. These are leaf nodes. So internodal means in between the leaf nodes. At this point, you either want to have really sharp secateurs or a sharp knife, and it's much easier to keep a knife sharp. So I'm going to move over to a knife. And the reason for this is that we want as little damage to the material as possible, a clean cut. And I'll just cut there. Now we only need one leaf because leaves are how it loses moisture. So I cut that off. Don't pull it because again you could tear it. And when you make internodal cuttings, the top wants to be shorter than the bottom. And then we can push that in. And the idea is to push it into a depth so the node is just covered by the soil. And then what I like to do is just cover that over with some grit. Just sprinkle it gently on like that. And that stops the surface of the soil being disturbed when you water it. Clematis cuttings need to be warm and moist to strike. A heated bench is perfect, but a windowsill is fine. Don't put them in direct sunlight. Water them and then keep them wet, not soaking wet. As much as anything, it's the air that needs to be moist around them. And then when you see them growing, you know they've got roots. And then put them on next spring and you've got lovely new clematis plants for free. Now, if I haven't persuaded you to take clematis cuttings, here are some things that you might want to be getting on with this weekend.
If you haven't yet got round to sowing any French beans, it's not too late. If you sow some now, they'll be ready for harvest in September and October. They like rich, well-manured ground, but are easy to grow. Just push in each bean about 3 or 4 inches apart, in rows, cover them over, and soon they'll germinate and grow in the warm soil. As the summer fruiting raspberries come to a finish, the autumn fruiting canes start to produce their berries. But it's a good idea to tie them up so that you can get at them easily to harvest. As they're going to be cut right back to the ground at the end of the season, it doesn't have to be a permanent structure, but it does have to be quite robust as the fruiting canes get heavy. Once thyme has finished flowering, it's a good idea to give it a trim back, because if you leave it, plants can become very woody and the supply of fresh, soft growth diminishes fast. But make sure there is some new growth visible beneath the cutting point, as they don't always rejuvenate from old wood.
I don't do them all in one go, but I like to cut back about 1/3 of the time first, let that regrow, and then do the rest. And that way, I've got a constant supply for the kitchen. Now, we're coming to that time of year when the Britain in Bloom competition is really hotting up. And Joe has been down to Bristol to join a group of people in one street as they prepare for the arrival of the judges.
Behind one of these doors is the lady who is leading this street on its quest for gardening gold.
Carol!
Oh, hi, Joe.
Hi. I brought some sprucer uppers with me.
Fantastic.
Yeah, but the street looks great, I have to say. Lots of colour.
Good.
Lots of hanging baskets.
It's time for the judging of the RHS Britain in Bloom competition, and for this street in Bristol, tomorrow is the big day. Carol is the driving force behind the team effort here. She's both field marshal and part of the gardening infantry.
Well, that's the most colourful well I've ever seen in my life, complete with hanging baskets.
Well, I'm glad you like it.
While the street looks really fantastic, the star attraction is the community garden.
It's like a village hall without the walls, I always think.
A village hall that is a garden. That's a
Which is
really
a
lovely
garden.
idea. It's wonderful. You got covered areas to sit. You got some fantastic planting. You've got different levels up towards some seating at the top as well.
But the judges aren't just interested in good design and a fancy floral display.
They're also interested in community and encouraging other people to green the grey, as they say, and bring dull areas in cities and towns to life.
So it's actually got to be integrated into the community. It's not just something that could pop up overnight to try and win.
No,
win Britain in bloom.
No. They particularly like evidence of how the garden's been through the year.
So Carol and her husband Chris have kept a detailed record, which is vital for their chances of success.
Well, we try to have an event at every sort of major festival. And, of course, people come together to work on it, and they come together to enjoy it, which, is what we're really aiming for.
How do you get people involved?
And we publicise it through the notice board at the far end of the garden. And we also quite often poke a little notice through people's doors just to make sure that everyone knows about it.
A little nudge. They're reminding them this Saturday we're having a working party going on.
This garden is a year-round team effort. Everyone mucks in to keep things looking beautiful. But with judging tomorrow and over 50 window boxes on display, Carol's not leaving anything to chance.
Right, well, we're armed with the mobile plant surgery unit here in case containers need a bit of action.
Oh, I just wondered if you could give me some advice about this rose.
Sure.
Okay. I'm wondering how much we should deadhead it. I know we should be deadheading, but I don't know.
But it's got some colour left in it.
It's got some colour, and if I take all the heads off...
Oh, there won't be anything there. But let's face it, they're all over.
They've all had it, really,
They've all
haven't
had
they?
it,
Yeah.
really. I mean, they're all brown. It's raining a bit today. It's only going to
Yeah,
get...
it's just going to... I'll just cut some of those off then.
I think you might have to lose all of them.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah?
Right, that's
looking better?
a lot better, thank you.
Yeah, it does look tidier. It does look tidier.
It does, thank you.
Executive decision made.
Good.
Right, let's move on. What's next?
Well, we're just going to look for dead heads, really, and
So what do we do? Just inspect them?
I'll have a little
That's
look.
looking all right, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's
not
probably
bad,
all
that
right.
one.
And this one.
Generally, how are you feeling about it? I mean, it's looking good, don't you think?
Yeah, I'm very happy, actually. Everyone's made such an effort. I think the street looks really amazing. It's the best it's ever looked. I'm just so pleased.
Oh, look at this. This one is immaculate, isn't it?
It's lovely, isn't it? It's so fresh.
Yes, absolutely. Fresh. That's good. Blue and white, nice and simple. Oh, just coming through, Liz. Wow, that looks good.
Doesn't it look good?
Doesn't it look really good, doesn't it?
Lovely, yes.
Great colours.
Yeah, we love that. Thank you.
Beautiful.
And if any of the residents aren't at home, caretaker Carol will even spruce up their window boxes for them, with their knowledge, of course.
Ah, this one looks a bit sad.
Oh, it does look a bit sad, doesn't it?
The grasses look all right.
A lovely colour, aren't they?
But the lobelia's sort of had it. What do you think?
I think we could do some replacement here.
I think so too. Should we just rip these out?
Yeah,
Yeah?
good idea. Good
Get them out.
thinking. Yep.
What have
I've
you
got some succulents here that might be
Oh,
good.
they'd be nice, yeah. They've worked well. Right,
Right, lovely.
gone. I think that. Don't you?
Yes, I think that.
You agree?
Definitely.
This committee decision.
This is a committee decision.
because you can't just.
And that's how we do things with
That's
the
how we
committee.
do things around here.
Yep.
Right, where are those succulents gone? It's a lovely little sedum, that, isn't
It is
it?
actually. It was the only one I could find actually like that.
I really like sedum. I think they're
I do
great.
too.
They're what I call holiday plants as well, because you sort of ignore them for a bit
Absolutely.
and come back and you know they'll be alive. Well, there you go. Looks good, doesn't it?
It does. It looks lovely.
Yes.
And I'll give it a good water later on
Yeah, it's going to need
because
that.
it's going to need that.
Might just swing it.
I hope so.
You might do, you never know.
Come on, mate. It's surprising what a little bit of communal effort can do to transform a situation. Of course, it's a bit more tricky when it's in shade. Here at Longmeadow, in the Writing Garden and the Spring Garden, for example, a lot of our plants perform beautifully before the foliage appears on the trees above them and casts a heavy shade. However, when you get to this time of year, of course, the leaves are all out and you've got shade whether you like it or not. But I don't really see that as a problem. In fact, it's an opportunity. A lot of plants like to perform and will give you good colour, and especially if they're out of the glare of full sunshine. These borders were made this spring. They're brand new. I've got some plants that will thrive perfectly well in this light, essentially woodland shade. Now, in here, I'm going to put this lovely Thalictrum. This is Thalictrum delavei. It was very much a plant of this time of year. Quite easy to grow, and this will grow up to 3-4 foot. It's elegant with these lovely delicate flowers and then very ferny foliage. And what I love about this particular Thalictrum is the colour of the stems is more or less the same colour as the flowers. As long as it's got some moisture in its soil, it's happy. Now, it is important, if you're planting in shade, to make sure that you enrich the soil as much as possible. And if you don't have your own compost, you can buy soil enricher. And the reason for that, as much as anything else, is to add organic content to the soil so it will hold moisture. Dry shade is what's really tricky. If you've got moisture in the ground, you'll be amazed at how many plants will grow in those conditions. The other plant which I want to add to these borders today is an anemone. This is Anemone hybrida whirlwind. It's white, it's strong growing, and of course, because of the shade, the white shines out.
These Japanese anemones can flower from August right through to October, adding colour and charm to any shady border.
While I've got it here, I did bring some compost if I needed it. If the soil was looking very dry or very poor, I will just add a little bit in there. Even on a rainy day like today, it is important to water in plants, particularly at this time of year, because actually the rain only gets in the top inch or so, and we want water to go down to the bottom of the planting hole. And it's a good time to plant now, because the soil is warm. As long as you keep them well watered, plants will grow quickly, get established late summer and in autumn, and then next year they will really romp away. That's it for today. And I'll be back here at Longmeadow at our normal time next week. So I'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Well, from gently dozing dogs to charging rhinos, Leeds take on St Helens next on BBC Two for another epic battle for the Rugby League Challenge Cup. Well, over on BBC 4 now, all the musical action, including old favourite The Planets, Friday night at the Proms.
This is Today. Good morning. Sarah Montague, Justin Webb.
For waking us up.
Let's take a look at our papers.